أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing with the same theme of trying to distinguish between truth and falsehood, we are now, inshallah, going to try to apply this theme, as we said, from different lenses to the lens of Islamic history, by focusing on a specific chapter of Islamic history that happened on the heels of, right after the tragedy of Karbala. And this is a chapter that is referred to as the revolution of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. The reason this is worth discussing, first and foremost, is that, as we will see, there is a little bit of controversy and a little bit of ambiguity around the assessment of the character himself, the figure of Al-Mukhtar ibn Ubaydah al-Thaqafi himself, as well as his revolution and his movement. What is our position from it in general? Secondly, the better we have an understanding of these types of events, the better it helps us understand the actual tragedy of Karbala. What was the political and social context, not only that led to the tragedy of Karbala, but what happened afterwards? Even at a material level, when we look at society, when we look at history, when we look at general culture, in a way, we can even ask the question, at a material level, as we said, how successful was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in his mission? Sometimes we ask this question at a more spiritual level, at a more mystical level. We know that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was incredibly successful just from the fact that we are here talking about it 14 centuries later. And we believe that the Imam of our time will rise with this as his banner. So we don't doubt that he was successful, but by the standards of history and society, when such a tragic and significant event happens, then we should be able to tell directly on society some of its repercussions. And so this event perhaps gives us a glimmer, a light into one of these repercussions. And more. Beyond understanding the history and understanding a little bit of the controversy around the figure and the revolution, we want to be able to see what kind of lessons we can draw from this entire revolution. Things that are very applicable and practical to our daily lives. There is a lot that we can go through. We don't have a lot of time, and we don't want to turn this into a purely historical discussion. So I'll try to go quickly and to focus on the right events and the right things, inshallah, that are a little bit more relevant, so that we leave a little bit more time for the analysis and the lessons that we draw from all of this. The man himself, Al-Mukhtar ibn Ubayd or Ubaydah al-Thaqafi, both are mentioned in history, was born in year 1 of the Hijrah of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. He was born the same year that the Holy Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina. And he was killed year 67 of Hijrah, meaning that he was a 67 years old man during this time, and he would be about 4 years older than Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam at every step of the way that we are going to talk about. He was born into a family, into a clan called Thaqif, hence his name, Al-Thaqafi. There are a few things known about this clan. One of them is that they were not particularly fond of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. The majority of Thaqif were not loyal or devoted to Ahl al-Bayt. They were a lot closer to the Khulafa, and they were not especially related in any way, shape or form to Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam, except for a few exceptional personalities. One of them was actually the father of al-Mukhtar. Abu Ubaid, or Abu Ubaidah himself, was considered to be a great companion of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, as well as Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he was eventually killed in battle. Another thing that we learn about Thaqif is that many of them were wealthy, and al-Mukhtar was born into wealth for sure. And many of them were brave, courageous warriors. And certainly the father of Mukhtar was known to be a brave, courageous warrior. In fact, he was a military leader. And these are two different things. To be an actual warrior yourself is different from being a military leader. And he was both. So was al-Mukhtar himself. In fact, he exceeded by far, as great as his father was, he exceeded by far pretty much everyone when it came to his fighting abilities as a warrior, as well as his military mind, his strategic mind. And beyond that, he was also considered to be a political mastermind. He knew how to maneuver in a very difficult political environment. And there are a lot of indications to this. We don't have time to go through it now. This is kind of the background and the portrait of the man. We're going to skip his youth, we're going to skip his teenage years and his youth to go directly to the part that is more relevant to us. When does he enter the picture for us? He enters into the picture when Muslim ibn Aqil, the messenger of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, is sent to Kufa. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, as we said, lived in Medina. He openly declared that he was not going to give his allegiance to Yazid as a Khalifa. And so he left. It was either that he leaves al-Medina or he may be killed in Medina. So he quickly left al-Medina towards Mecca. In Mecca, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam received messengers carrying bags upon bags of letters. These letters do not represent people who wrote to Imam al-Hussein. Each of the letters represents a clan or a tribe of people writing to the Imam. So if we say, for instance, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam received 4,000 or 8,000 or 12,000 letters, we are talking about a much greater number of people that these letters represent, sent by a number of messengers that actually met in person with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Mecca. All of them telling the Imam that they are ready to greet him and to prepare the ground for him, to greet him as their Khalifa in the southern areas of Iraq, in Kufa, in Basra and elsewhere where the letters are coming from. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam decides therefore to dispatch someone to go look into the matter and to prepare the ground for him. And so he sends a few men with or under the leadership of Muslim ibn Aqil, the cousin of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when he wrote the letter to the people who will receive Muslim, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wrote that I am sending to you my cousin and my brother and the most trustworthy man of my household. Muslim ibn Aqil leaves Mecca towards Kufa. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had given him a clear instruction that when you reach Kufa, I want you to go into the house of the most trustworthy man in Kufa. That's it. He doesn't specify who. When Muslim ibn Aqil reaches Kufa, whose house does he go into? He goes into Mukhtar's house. And this is already a first indication that there is a lot more going on than perhaps we know, or that history is telling us. Muslim for sure is obeying Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and knows exactly what the Imam means. And so he goes to Kufa, and right away al-Mukhtar goes into action. And he starts working with Muslim ibn Aqil himself and the other leaders and companions of Imam Ali who were still in Kufa to gather support for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, including Hani ibn Urwa and others. As they quickly move, they start to notice that they are now under a lot of scrutiny. People are starting to take notice. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam receives a letter at this time from Muslim ibn Aqil telling him that I have secured 18,000 men who have paid allegiance to you in Kufa. And in fact, the numbers tell us that they might have gone up to 40,000. But this letter from Muslim, we know for sure, is evidence that at least 18,000 people paid allegiance to Muslim ibn Aqil, that they would be supporters of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So clearly there's a lot of movement happening. Al-Mukhtar is a very well-known man. They notice that suddenly Bani Umayyah are very interested in their activities, so they change their strategy. Muslim ibn Aqil leaves the house of Al-Mukhtar towards the house of Hani ibn Urwa, and in fact Muslim ibn Aqil starts to move around between different houses so that it's not easy to pinpoint him. As for Al-Mukhtar, he completely leaves Kufa. He has a lot of lands outside of Kufa that he owns. He goes to some of his lands, but they did not agree on a specific place and time to meet. This all took them by surprise. They moved very quickly. Al-Mukhtar goes to a little bit outside of Kufa. He stays there for a while, waiting for things hopefully to calm down. During this time, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad has entered Kufa. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was a governor over Basra. He is known to be especially violent and ruthless. Yazid sends him to also become the governor over Kufa because he feels that there's an activity there in support of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So to quash any potential or support that may emerge against Yazid with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Kufa, he sends Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad, as soon as he reaches, he starts to either kill anyone who may associate with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, or torture them, or force them into exile, or imprison them. So thousands of Shia were thrown into jail during that time. Anyone who may have supported Imam Hussein alayhi salam is being thrown into jail, if not killed right away. This all happened while Mukhtar is a little bit outside of Kufa. He comes back to Kufa. When he enters Kufa, the men of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad do not wait for him to come and talk and interrogate and see what has happened or not. You and I today know that maybe Al-Mukhtar was working behind the scenes to rally support. People at that time should not have known that Al-Mukhtar is acting in this way, but there were no questions asked. Al-Mukhtar was right away taken as a captive, brought in front of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who did not ask him any questions. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad always carried a rod of metal with him. As soon as he saw Al-Mukhtar in front of him, he hit him on the face with the piece of metal that he carries. And he split his face open from over his eye until the bottom of his lips. So he injured him very severely, and then he ordered him to be thrown in jail. Al-Mukhtar goes to jail. Here we encounter one of the first lessons that inshallah we're going to come back to a little bit later. Al-Mukhtar is depressed. He is sad. He's not sure what to do next. Most likely he will be executed because Ubaydullah bin Ziyad is known to be ruthless. There's not going to be a lot of chances given to anyone, especially not someone of the stature of Al-Mukhtar. And he is dealing with this severe injury while thrown in jail. But when he goes to jail, he encounters thousands of Shia also thrown in jail. And one of them was a very remarkable man who would deserve his own series of lectures. Mitham al-Tammar, one of the greatest companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. A man that would clearly be used by Ahl al-Bayt, be used by Imam Ali alayhi salam with very specific missions. Perhaps we would call them secret missions. Even the type of knowledge that Imam Ali alayhi salam would give him is not normal knowledge. He was one of those that were referred to in history as being the carriers of the knowledge. They call them ilm al-manaya wal-balaya. Imam Ali alayhi salam had taught him the manner in which everyone would die. And he knew what would be the tribulations that would happen next in society. We would say he kind of has all the prophecies. He understands what would happen next and in the exact way people would die. And it seems that he spent a lot of time with Al-Mukhtar in jail. Maybe giving him a crash course. Maybe telling him exactly what he needed to hear at that time. In part, Mukhtar was maybe not sure what would happen next. Maybe thinking that they would all be executed in jail. He told Al-Mukhtar, no, you and I will both leave this jail, but I will be killed right away. And this is well known. For a very long time, Mitham al-Tammar used to pray at a palm tree. He knew that he would be killed at that palm tree. Imam Ali alayhi salam had shown him the exact palm tree where he would be killed and crucified for his love for Ali. Inshallah, another day we talk about Mitham al-Tammar. He told him, you and I will both leave, but I will be killed right away. As for you, your mission is going to be to kill the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You will leave here, don't worry. This seems to have transformed the life of Al-Mukhtar from that point on. Al-Mukhtar writes letters from jail. They make it all the way to his brother-in-law. Al-Mukhtar has a sister by the name of Safiya. Safiya is married to the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar is someone who is very respected by Bani Umayyah in general. He was one of the first to give his allegiance to Muawiyah. They respected him for his stature and for his position, his favorable disposition towards Bani Umayyah. He happens to be the brother-in-law of Al-Mukhtar. So he wrote letters trying to get his brother-in-law out of jail, and that he would be the guarantee that he would not be a threat or a danger to Bani Umayyah. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad receives instructions initially to release Al-Mukhtar. He doesn't want to know anything about it. But then he receives instructions directly from Yazid saying, release him for the sake of Abdullah ibn Umar. So he calls Al-Mukhtar and he tells him, I'm releasing you. I'm giving you 3 days to leave Kufa. If I see you after 3 days in Kufa, I behead you. You're decapitated and I kill you right away. I never want to see your face in Kufa again. As Al-Mukhtar leaves, he promises that he is going to kill Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and those with him laughed, telling him, you're a prisoner, you have an injury to deal with. You know, this is not very realistic. In any case. So he leaves and goes to Mecca. He spends time in Mecca and he encounters Bani Zubayr. Inshallah, another day we'll talk about Bani Zubayr. Bani Zubayr are people who are trying to seize this opportunity to become the Khulafa and get rid of Bani Umayyah, led by Abdullah ibn Zubayr. When he reaches Mecca, they see that this is a great man to associate with. Mukhtar is an incredible powerhouse. He's a warrior, he's a military mastermind, he's a political mastermind, and he's very wealthy. So how about we create an alliance and we work together to get rid of Bani Umayyah? We're all in agreement around that. True? True. So he agrees to work with them. In the meantime, he writes a letter to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, the brother of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, telling him, I want to go on a mission to start purifying this earth from the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And I want your support. Will you support me? Do I have your blessing and your permission for that? In the meantime, he creates this alliance with Bani Zubayr to fight Bani Umayyah on one condition, that whatever Abdullah ibn Zubayr does has to be run by Al-Mukhtar first, so that he's in agreement with it. Fighting erupts, they see how Al-Mukhtar fights. Bani Umayyah and Bani Zubayr, fighting occurs, they see Al-Mukhtar fighting. Abdullah ibn Zubayr says, I no longer care who is with me or who is against me, so long as this man is with me. When he saw how he fights, he's legendary in his fighting ability. It doesn't matter who else is in my army, and it doesn't matter who is standing in the enemy army. So long as Al-Mukhtar is with us, we're victorious. That's how much of a warrior he was. But Al-Mukhtar quickly realizes that this is a tyrant, and it's not going to be possible to work with this man towards his own aims. In the meantime, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah does not give clear support to Al-Mukhtar, nor does he deny him support. His answer is ambiguous. Al-Mukhtar takes that, and in the meantime Yazid dies. Yazid ibn Muawiyah, the killer of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, dies at that time. This creates a weakness in Bani Umayyah. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who had been the governor of Kufa, by now he had returned to his base in Basra, and he was a little lost. Do I continue to stay and keep my allegiance with Bani Umayyah? Do I turn to Bani Zubayr? There's a weakness in Bani Umayyah. Al-Mukhtar seizes that and comes back into Kufa. And he starts rallying the troops. And he starts to gather the people very quickly. And he tells them, I have the blessing of Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. A lot of the people start to join with him. Last year we talked about a group of people. I don't have time to make all the linkages now. We talked about a group of people called the Tawabun, the repenters. Inshallah, many of you who were here, you will remember the story of the repenters. Those who felt so guilty that they did not support Imam Hussein alayhi salam when they could have, that they decided to launch a whole revolution right after Karbala. The Tawabun, some of them were still in Kufa when Al-Mukhtar goes back to Kufa. So he tries to join forces with them. We're going to come back to this point. Who notices all of this movement? Bani Zubayr. He had just created an alliance with them. Now he is back in Kufa, and his actions don't seem to be fully aligned with what Bani Zubayr want to do. So they work hard to get him jailed the second time. Once again, his brother-in-law intervenes, and he is taken out of jail. As people notice this, they say, this is a strange man. He has too many political connections. He's too influential. He has too much of a good network. We're not sure whether we could trust him or not. Is it even true that Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah is supporting him and giving him his blessings or not? So a group leaves from the heads of Kufa. They leave Kufa and they go to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah in Mecca. And they start asking him about Al-Mukhtar. Is it true that you're supporting Al-Mukhtar and his movement or not? Did you give him your blessing? Is this working with the orders of Bani Hashim or not? Once again, he gave an ambiguous answer, which they interpreted as, yes, I'm supporting him. But if you are meticulous and you read the manner in which he answered, it's ambiguous. It's not a complete yes, and it's definitely not a no. In the meantime, Al-Mukhtar had weakened. People were all waiting to see. He didn't know that these people had gone to ask about him. All this is time passing, wasted opportunity. They come back and they say, it's true, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah supported him. Now the people rally around Al-Mukhtar. And Al-Mukhtar starts to move very quickly. He builds an army and he takes over Kufa entirely. So now Kufa is under the control of Al-Mukhtar. Bani Umayyah start to move again. He dispatches an army of 3,000 people, not more, towards the army of Ubaidullah bin Ziyad at that time, which was 80,000. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad considers this laughable. He only sends about 12,000 of his men to fight them. The group of Mukhtar defeat them, and then they come back. That's the first major victory for Mukhtar. Mukhtar is starting to gain a lot of ground and a lot of strength. This way, Al-Mukhtar sees that they can build more. He builds an army of 7,000 and he puts them under the leadership of Ibrahim ibn Malik al-Ashtar. And when he's about to send him, as soon as he is about to send him on a mission, there is an internal uprising in Kufa that starts. It's as though Al-Mukhtar was dealing with external things first, and suddenly they notice that all the men, all the military power of Al-Mukhtar was now outside of Kufa. So who joined forces inside of Kufa first? Bani Zubayr and Bani Umayyah and the notables and elites of Kufa all joined forces against Mukhtar internally. So Al-Mukhtar calls back Ibrahim with the entire army of 7,000 plus the about 3,000 to 4,000 he had, and they quickly get rid of this internal revolution. At that point, Al-Mukhtar changes strategy and he starts to hunt down the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Those were the people who led the uprising. Because those were the people who initially, it seemed that Mukhtar is giving them a lot of leeway. They had the impression Mukhtar was just wanted to be a political ruler, and they could eventually accommodate themselves with him, the notables and the elites. Now they started to doubt. It doesn't look like this is what this man is doing. These are movements going towards another direction. We may be next. Which is exactly what al-Mukhtar wanted to do, as he had revealed again and again. But no one knows this because this was in secret. So now al-Mukhtar quickly moves to hunt down the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And so he found them one by one. I'm not going to go through the list. You know them. There were many of them who were still in Kufa. There were some of them who had escaped to Basra. There are some of them who went into the desert. He went on a mission to find the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and he would say, I feel no pleasure in this world, not in my sleep and not in my food and not in my drink, so long as I know that some of the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam are the impurities that are still on this earth. I must cleanse this earth from this impurity. And he would write to Bani Hashim about this. This goes on. Al-Mukhtar starts to send gifts and information to Bani Hashim, to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya and Imam al-Sajjad. I have killed so-and-so. So-and-so has now been caught. So-and-so has not been killed. And as he is gaining power, because he is now a ruler, he's also sending gifts of money to allow Bani Hashim, who are oppressed in Medina, to start rebuilding their lives that were entirely destroyed since the time of Imam al-Hussein and before. The houses of Bani Talib, Imam Ali, Aqil, others had all been completely destroyed. They were rubble. So he starts to send money and to send aid and to send news. All of this continues for a while. He dispatches this army even stronger, once again under Ibrahim, because there's someone that he really wants to find, who is the leader of all of this, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who is leading the army of 80,000. So Ibrahim takes his army, perhaps less than 20,000 for sure. There are different reports here. His army is growing. He takes that army between 20,000, and he goes towards the army of 80,000 of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And they actually defeat them. The army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad becomes disorganized, they scatter, and he, Ibrahim, kills Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad himself. And he sends news back to al-Mukhtar that he has been killed. And this is kind of the final nail in the coffin, that all of the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam had been caught, had been killed, including the leaders, including the heads. I'll quickly wrap up to move into the other parts of the discussion. The rest of the story, unfortunately, is that now that all of these victories were achieved, Al-Mukhtar started to write to Ibrahim to come back. And Ibrahim stopped writing back. He has the big army. Al-Mukhtar is left with a small contingent, a small battalion left in Kufa. All of his men and all of his equipment and all of his strength is with Ibrahim fighting. And the big mission is done. I need you back here now. Ibrahim stopped answering. Bani Zubayr noticed that Al-Mukhtar seems to be in a state of weakness. So Mus'ab ibn Zubayr, the brother of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who was now ruling Basra, he prepares a quick army of 7,000, not only of Bani Zubayr, but to whom also Bani Umayyah joined, and also the elites of Kufa joined, all of them seeking to destroy and kill Al-Mukhtar. So they attack, and Al-Mukhtar dispatches the army that he has left, about 3,000 men, facing at least 7,000 if not more. And this is the first serious defeat of the army of Mukhtar. They are severely defeated to the point where Mukhtar leaves Kufa and goes to fight with them. And then he sees that there is no point continuing to fight, so they start retreating towards Kufa. They retreat all the way back to the castle in Kufa, the castle of the government, the office of the government, where basically the entire population of Kufa, the supporters of Al-Mukhtar, and the entire population, they hide inside the castle, and Mus'ab comes to lay a siege around the castle. And the siege lasts between 40 days and 4 months. There are different reports in history. During this time, Al-Mukhtar kept trying to get his people to fight with him, to go out and fight with him. We're saying there's at least 6,000 men who were there with Al-Mukhtar in the castle. And of course, under siege, no water, no food, you're soon going to run out of supplies. You can't last like this forever. He refused to be in that situation. But no one wanted to fight with Al-Mukhtar anymore. And he told them, you're betraying me like betrayed the ones before me. No one fought with the Mukhtar anymore. And so he would go with very small groups of men, 10, 12, 15, 20 men, do a small battle and come back, small battle and come back during this time. Until at the end he saw that there's no one fighting with him. So at the end they say it was in the middle of the month of Ramadan that he put on his perfume, he wore his best clothes, and he told them, I'm going for the final battle. I am fighting till death. Whoever wants to join me, join me. I'm not staying in this castle to wait for death to happen to me or to die of hunger. And so we're told that 17 men joined Al-Mukhtar only. The 6,000 others decided that they would surrender to Mus'ab. Al-Mukhtar told them, it's not about surrendering. They will not accept your surrender. They said, no, they will accept. They will see that we're not a threat. And so Al-Mukhtar goes to fight, and he is killed along with the 17 with him. That's in year 67 Hijri. They take the 2 wives of Al-Mukhtar, had 2 wives, Thabit and Amra. They take them in captives. Mus'ab ibn Zubayr interrogates them. They ask them, what do you think of Mukhtar? They both say he was a really good man. We never saw any evil from him. He was a worshipper. He was devout. He was a lover of Ahlul Bayt. He fasted and prayed all the time. They said, if you repeat these words, you will be executed. What do you think of Mukhtar? So Thabit said, in order to survive, she said, he was a disbeliever, he was a bad man, he was full of evil, he did not believe in God, he did not pray, he did not fast. And she was like, go. His other wife, Amra, the daughter of Al-Nu'man, who used to be the governor of Kufa before, she repeated the same words, and she added even more. I swear I have seen nothing but good from him. He was a good man, he was a worshipper, and so on and so forth. They told her, if you repeat these words, we will kill you. She said, this is a welcome martyrdom coming my way. I don't want to reject it. Let it come. And so she was the first woman in the history of Islam beheaded, the wife of Al-Mukhtar. Her name was Amra bint al-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir. In any case, we continue with the story, the 6,000 who had hid with the Mukhtar in the castle. What happened to them? One of the greatest tragedies of history once again. Mus'ab ibn Zubayr ordered that they are all beheaded, and they were all killed. Now, this is the end of the chapter in history of the revolution of Mukhtar. Nothing was left from the revolution of Mukhtar after this. The controversy, in a few minutes. The controversy around Al-Mukhtar is the fact that, first of all, there's a major disagreement between the 2 schools of thought, the Sunni and the Shia, when it comes to Al-Mukhtar. The Sunni school considers him a man to have lied, to have been a criminal, to have pretended himself, claimed to be himself a prophet of God, and to have received revelation from Allah, and to have worked with sorcerers and witchcraft and others. Why? You have to go back in the manner in which history, Islamic history, is written. Believe it or not, the first historians in Islam were from Bani Zubayr. And today many of what we find in the reports of history are actually coming to us from Bani Zubayr. They were actually themselves historians. They were writing the history. And I don't have time to explain who Bani Zubayr were more than what we said. Bani Zubayr, in short, were people who hated the Holy Prophet ﷺ and Ahlul Bayt with a passion. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the man we just talked about, who was trying to become the Khalifa, for 6 months that he was a Khalifa and he was giving sermons, he refused to mention the name of the Holy Prophet ﷺ for 6 months. Imagine any of you talking about religion for 5 or 10 minutes. Can you actually talk about any topic in religion without mentioning once a prayer or the name of the Holy Prophet? For 6 months he did this, intentionally. And he would say this is out of hatred for Bani Hashim, because they feel that they are too arrogant because of them having the Holy Prophet as part of their family. In any case, and we saw what they did, and this is their massacre, and that's why a lot of people say their tyranny and their barbary and their savagery is no less than Bani Umayyah. And I just gave you some examples of that. Imagine people like that now talking about the man who was now their enemy. And history was written by Bani Umayyah, and history was written by Bani al-Abbas. So what do you want them to say about the man who made it his life's work and mission to hunt down and kill the killers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? Okay? And that's why some of our scholars who have done a lot of the research around this, Sayyid al-Khu'i in his Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith, volume 19, he has an extensive study of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. He goes through every riwayah and shows that the riwayat that are condemning, because we have a riwayat from our imams that condemn al-Mukhtar. They say he was a bad man, that he was a liar, that he should not have ever associated with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, don't associate with him. Sayyid al-Khu'i shows each one of these riwayat to have actually no chain of transmission. You can't even apply ilm al-rajal that we talked about earlier, because there is no full chain of transmission to them, which are considered to be fabrications. And so he rejects all of these riwayat. Him who is considered perhaps the greatest expert in ilm al-rajal. Right? And then he shows how there are numerous riwayat that we have from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam about him, praising him. We have riwayat from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam blessing al-Mukhtar. As we said, there is money that was received by Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam al-Sajjad would take the money and he rebuilt the houses of Bani Hashim with that money. And Bani Hashim could now live in dignity in Medina al-Munawwara because of the work of al-Mukhtar. Imam al-Baqir has this narration where we are told by the narrator that a man came to kiss the hand of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam while he was in pilgrimage. Imam al-Baqir refused to give him his hand. So the man sat far away. And then the Imam told him, "Who are you?" He told him, "My name is al-Hakam and I am the son of al-Mukhtar." He told him, "Come near me." And the narrator said he brought him so close to him that it is as though he was going to sit him in his lap. And then he told him, "What do you want?" He told him, "I'm here to ask your opinion about my father al-Mukhtar. People have talked so much about him. Some people say he's a liar and he's a disbeliever and he did all of this for gains of this world and politics. Whatever you tell me, I will accept as the truth. What do I believe about my father?" Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam said, "Subhanallah, that people say this about your father." And then he starts to say some of the merits. Imam al-Baqir said, "I am born out of a gift that your father sent to my father." Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, his mother, was a slave woman that al-Mukhtar had bought and sent as a gift to Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam al-Baqir is born out of that wedding and that marriage. And another narration says her mahar, her gift was from al-Mukhtar. And then Imam al-Baqir, and we have other narrations from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that says no woman in the household of Bani Hashim ever took care of herself since the time Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam died until news and gifts were received from al-Mukhtar. For years, the Imams say the women in the household of the Holy Prophet, they were in a state of mourning and sadness over the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq is precise. He says no woman combed her hair or put henna in her hair or perfume on her body out of sadness for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam for all those years until they received news from Mukhtar that he had killed the killers of Imam al-Hussein and the gifts started to come from him. Then happiness entered into the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam once again. So this is praise. And then 3 times he says, "May mercy be upon al-Mukhtar, may mercy be upon al-Mukhtar, may mercy be upon al-Mukhtar." Brothers and sisters, allow me to take a couple of minutes to end with a few lessons from the life of Mukhtar. The first one has to do with the fact that when we look at the tragedy of Karbala, we see that there were clear repercussions socially and politically after the tragedy of Karbala. The society changed. And this is one of the indications of this. The Shia at that time suddenly started to have a political entity. They existed as a dignified group. This had ceased to exist before. And so therefore, the tragedy of Karbala had very clear repercussions. Another lesson. In Dua Arafah, we said Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for bringing him into existence at a specific point in time. If you study closely the life of al-Mukhtar, you see that it is as though he was brought specifically at a certain point in time to play a specific mission. This does not apply only to Mukhtar. This applies to all of us, to our lives. Why am I born in this world, at this time, in this country, from these parents, with this background, everything that God is giving me? Why? What am I supposed to be doing with all of this? What's my mission in this world? This is what Mukhtar understood from it. And he made it a very clear mission. He's not going to waste it. More than that, we have to analyze history with a critical eye. Don't accept everything that history throws your way. And don't accept the world with everything that it throws your way without a critical mind. When we study the life of Mukhtar, we see that there are layers. You might just look at one association from Mukhtar and suddenly decide that Mukhtar is a bad, evil person. We have to be more strategic and more thoughtful in how we look at the world and how we operate in the world. Al-Mukhtar and Al-Tawwabun did not fully agree. This does not make Al-Tawwabun bad people. And it does not make Al-Mukhtar a bad person. But there were repercussions. Al-Mukhtar would have been a lot stronger had the Tawwabun been with him. And the Tawwabun would have been a lot stronger had the Mukhtar been with them. They were all good people with good intentions, but they did not unite. They did not work together. These are tens of thousands of people who could have been working together towards the same mission, but they could not agree. And we leave the discussion to another time of why. The last point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every one of us gifts. Al-Mukhtar was born into wealth. Al-Mukhtar was full of bravery and courage. And Al-Mukhtar was an awesome warrior. Al-Mukhtar was someone with social status, political status. But he used everything he had towards his goals. Nothing was wasted. There's no one sitting here or anywhere in the world who is not born with gifts and into passions and into talents and into things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. The question is, what do you do with them? How will you use them? You have to make a decision. To Al-Mukhtar, this was not always clear. He had to move towards that, and it was not always easy. But his mission in life became very clear at that time. We'll continue inshallah this discussion tomorrow night. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.